and YouTube blog covering the German startup scene with news, interviews, and live events.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Joe from Startuprad.io, your startup podcast and YouTube blog from Germany, bringing you again another update with deep ecosystems. And Thomas is here again with me. Hey, how you doing?
Hi, how you doing, Joe?
I'm doing good. I'm still getting over Corona, so really sorry if I'm not on top of my game here right now. This time we thought instead of boring statistics, we bring you a little bit deeper insight before we meet again end of January to get you the review of 2022. So when I've been digging through your very extensive reports, I do believe it had something like 120 to 150 slides containing lots of data.
Yes, exactly.
And I realized there's something different. That's where the headline of today is coming from, since you realized over the years that in Europe you don't have like the single full-fledged startup hubs like you have in the US, especially Silicon Valley Bay Area. But you rather have a network of hubs that startups move through in their startup journey to achieve different stages of their startup life. So that's why we will be today talking about the network of the European startup hubs here.
Yes, this is something that you see in Europe for some time now, that even the big hubs don't reach the same size as in the global competition. So even if you look outside of the Silicon Valley, large hubs around the world reach much larger investment sums than the European top hubs like London and Berlin. And that is partially explained by the networked and decentralized structure of the innovations system in Europe.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. At least for the Silicon Valley Bay Area, I could explain that because that's basically the cradle of today's startup culture. So they had to have everything in one place because there was no other place to go. How much do you think is the free movement within the European Union a part of this development of a startup hub network?
Yes, I think that is the prerequisite for that, but also it is a workaround. No? So if you consider the geographical structure of Europe, it has been growing with changing borders since centuries, and we have smaller countries, we have smaller markets. So of course, entrepreneurs need to, first of all, overcome these borders that still represent a border and a barrier for them to grow. So before we had the European unification process and the single market, of course, all the structures were nationally built, and that's still today the mindset and the basis we start from. As a German, you start in Germany. As a French, you start in France. But with the increased connectivity between individuals and also the institutions of the European Union, people start to think cross-border, and they also realize that there is a limit to growth if they only think in their own national borders. The French will never be as big as the US, and the Germans neither. So they need to collaborate. And this insight that collaboration can put us in a competitive spot with the rest of the world, namely the US and China, that led to this more connected approach. And I think with these improvements of mobility, the Schengen area, the free movement that we have, we are able to build a more connected innovation ecosystem. And then with that more connected ecosystem, we're also more able to compete internationally.
What I also found interesting, so today we are only picking out 3 function of hubs in this network and show you how startups are moving along this network, staying in cities. And what I found very interesting, they're not completely packing up each time and totally move to another place, but they leave some staff there, some functions, some departments, maybe research locations, so they get spread out all over Europe. It's something I found very interesting there.
Yes, in fact, I think we previously, I think the idea of mobility of founders in Europe was, okay, a startup that doesn't find the right conditions in the place they started will just move to Berlin and pack up everything and leave, and then it's lost forever. In fact, that's not the reality. What we see is that a lot of founders have a journey that takes them through several locations in Europe, and they are not basically moving from one place to another indefinitely, but rather they are moving around and they have presence in several places. So statistically, what we observe is that 62% of startups in Europe have a transnational setup. So 62%, and that's quite early stage already. So they start in the first year to expand to other places. Now, expansion is here defined as any kind of structured relation you have with another country. So that might be you have employees in a different country. That might be you have an investor in a different country. That might be you have a branch or even your headquarter in a different country. We see that phenomenon as well, that a startup has their staff and all the people in one place, but their legal headquarter is in a different location. So all of these kind of international relations, they are in these 62%. And that shows us that startups are very connected in Europe. They are not just starting in one place, they're starting in several places.
What came to mind when you talked about this is the classical tech hub either in Southern Europe or in Eastern Europe. And some startups that I've worked with personally now have, for example, the coding team in Croatia, in Serbia. So, at one point, Ukraine used to be very popular, but I do believe that is a trend we've seen a lot. Because you do some arbitrage, you hire the people there on location a little bit cheaper than you would, for example, in Frankfurt, in Berlin, in London. On the other hand, the discount is getting lower and lower in my personal experience.
Yes, this is an effect that you have both with startups as well as with established firms. I mean, if you go to Poland, I just been in Gdansk last week. You see large skyscrapers there full of international companies that have outsourced. Gdansk, for example, has, I think, the Amazon Alexa team there. So they are developing the software behind Alexa in Gdansk in Poland. And that's, of course, part of this mix of arbitrage, lower costs, but also talent, highly educated, EU standard education that you can find. So that's a good mix. In my experience, and also what the data shows, is that the hiring abroad is not limited to, let's say, arbitrage and lower costs. It's definitely not limited to this. You see often that startups go to hire the best talent in another place. And it's rather that the flexibility on the location is a concession to the talent that wants to stay in their lifestyle, that wants to stay in their area. Maybe they have family, etc. So it's a concession from the startup to be flexible on place and allow someone that have been living and working in, let's say, Stockholm, to work for a Berlin-based startup without moving. So I think that is a big part of this as well. And we don't only see cost savings, but we see actively internationalization by the startups to attract the best talent in their niche, in their field, that they wouldn't find maybe in the place they started.
When I was going through this report, I was curious, how long are you already gathering data on European startup hubs? And when was the first point in time that you realized, oh, this is not competing hubs, this is a journey, this is a network of hubs there?
Yeah, in fact, we started in 2016. It was a group of entrepreneurs that later founded the company Deep Ecosystems. But before, it was really a project that entrepreneurs in Europe from different places, actually from Italy, Germany, Poland, the UK, came together and said, we know so little about each other. Back then, London was not yet like so clearly the leader. It wasn't completely clear that it will be a big startup hub. In Berlin, similar. We knew something's happening, but still people were thinking, what's happening there? I have no idea. If I'm in Milan, I wouldn't know what's happening in Berlin. There was no visibility. There was no transparency. That was our first motivation to understand better the experience of a founder in a different location, and that's why we started to collect data. And if you look at it this way, it was always our core idea to increase the connectivity and start to exchange among founders. And so we are a bit biased as well, if you will, because we believe in these networks. And so our research was always focused on understanding the connectivity. And in fact, we see an increase of connectivity over time. There's more and more founder mobility. People were always telling us, well, now with the further integration, all the virtual collaboration opportunities, you will see less founder mobility. Basically, you can start your company from everywhere. True, you can, but actually the mobility of founders has increased over time, and founders enjoy moving around, and they take the opportunities. So mobility and moving to a new place becomes more and more common.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any idea how many data points have gone into this analysis of the European Startup Network?
Yeah. So the database at this point has around, I would say, 70, 80 indicators now that we track for about 120 cities. So so you can make the math to create the number of data points that we collect. So the indicators range from everything like investment raised, the number of early stage startups getting supported by accelerators, the meetups we have, the number of developers available in a certain startup hub, the international connections, popularity, news mentions. We look at technology trends on social media, what is being discussed. So we really have a wide range of indicators that we can look at to understand what's happening. And if you want to put dimensions, connectivity can be understood as founder mobility, can be understood as the flow of investments, but can also be understood as the emergence of a common narrative. Now, do we believe in sustainability and impact? That's now a narrative, but in some places this is stronger, and in others this is not strong at all. It's also a measure of connectivity. If you say like the idea of purpose-driven startups, this is very strong now in hubs like Berlin or maybe also London, right? But it maybe is not so strong in another hub that is maybe disconnect from this kind of communication, from this kind of dialogue. And so it takes longer until a new trend arrives there because they are less connected.
For everybody who's just looking for a quarterly update, we'll have one in early 2023. We do believe you'll have the data together sometime end of January 2023, and we'll have the recording early February, and mid towards end of February, you'll get a quarterly update. We've now talked about a lot of those hubs, and one of the functions is what you call a fundraising hub. And I found 12 startup hubs in Europe already reach a critical size. They raised more than 1 billion euros in funding in 1 year. They are, not surprisingly, Berlin, London, Paris, Stockholm, Tel Aviv, but also Munich, Amsterdam, Barcelona, Madrid, Copenhagen, and Dublin. And they come a long way from only one, namely London, in 2013. I think that is pretty good development, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Helsinki is also part of this. So it's a part of the democratization of innovation in Europe. Now you see more hubs reach critical size. Now, is 1 billion a lot or is it not? you can discuss. On a global scale, it's not a lot. No, so you're not competing yet with New York and Silicon Valley. If you raise 1 billion, you're still far. London, for example, had I think 12 or 13 billion in 2021. But the magical number, 1 billion US dollar per year, comes, of course, from the unicorn startup, where we say, okay, if they reach a 1 billion valuation, then we call them a unicorn. But we felt like this is not like an adequate indicator for the development of an ecosystem. If you have or have not a unicorn, 0 or 1, it's not so interesting for analysis of the ecosystem and the health of the ecosystem. So we said, okay, what could be still representing that ambition of growing a successful hub, and still reflect that kind of unicorn idea, but be a better indicator for the city, for the hub. So we said, let's create this indicator, the unicorn ecosystem, where all the startups that are active in that hub are counted together. And if they raise in 1 year jointly more than 1 billion, we give them that status of a unicorn ecosystem. And the interesting thing is that this number was very low in the past. No? So we had 1, 2, 3, then we had 4 of these hubs for a long time. And only last year, it jumped to 12 cities. And 2021 was a particular year. We had driven through the digitalization that was driven by COVID. We had like large investments in startups, and that's why we saw a big jump in places making it above 1 billion. And this shows that they have all the necessary parts to be really a fully fledged ecosystem where you can grow a startup and raise a significant amounts of funding.
That sounds pretty good. Especially the growth. I do believe 2022 will not be such a great year, and there may be a few less startup hubs reaching this 1 billion, but I do believe they'll be coming back. As we said, we have a few functions now picked out here. I found 3 stages in your report especially interesting. They start in a university, they accelerate to test their ideas in the accelerator hub, and they eventually raise funds in a top hub. As we said, the basic idea is you don't need to keep the founders, you don't need to offer everything to be a startup hub, but you have to offer the best solution for a certain stage of a certain industry that the startups are active in. This also led me to conclude that Europe is not a continent of rivaling startup hubs, but rather a network of startup nodes fulfilling different functions in the life cycle of a startup. If you want to be on this map, you have to look for function you could fulfill in a certain type, for a certain type of startup, so to say. Look where you can be useful. Where do the startups and the hubs or the nodes profit from this?
Yes, you described this very well. We see like these journeys. No, the startups are coming out of very good universities that maybe not located in business hubs. Now we have the example of, for example, here Lausanne. No? Startups might come out of Lausanne, which is a fantastic city, and it's in Switzerland, which is economically strong, of course. But Lausanne is not like the same as Munich or London, right? In terms of business connections and market access, etc. So you have like very interesting universities that produce very bright entrepreneurs and also give them already an entrepreneurial mindset. Still, they need to move on to test their idea. And other hubs might have specialized in supporting startups in the first steps of market testing, finding a product market fit, These might be hubs where very, very good accelerators have emerged. Mention here Valencia, which is again, not a place that on the global landscape in terms of business. No, it's not where the biggest tech companies are located or born. But still, they have very strong acceleration. There's an accelerator, Lanzadera, that is placed there. It's accelerating many, many international startups. So it's supporting a lot of entrepreneurs from everywhere that come there and helps them to find their product market fit. Once they have that product market fit, most likely they don't stay in Valencia, because that's their product market fit is probably in a different market. It's probably maybe it's not in Spain, maybe it's not in Valencia, so they might move to another hub to actually sell their product and also to raise investment, because while Valencia might have good business angels and it might get a first investment, if you then want to go into later stage, Series A, B, C, D, then you need to go to a place where these kind of investors are existing. So you need to go to maybe Berlin, Paris, or London. So you see that journey, and startups go through these kind of steps, and they give back, of course, to all of the places they have touched. Imagine this startup that went through, let's say, from Lausanne to Valencia to London. Once they receive their 100 million investment, they will, of course, have still connections in these places. And when they need to quickly invest in the growth of their company, they will make use of the networks and capabilities that they have met and found in all of these places. They will come back to the university, to the professor, and ask, what talent can I hire? Because you know them, you taught them. Which talent can I hire? Well, can I maybe open a lab that I need next to your lab? Can I maybe buy a place from the university? We've seen that from BioNTech, one of the largest successes in European startups. BioNTech bought a laboratory after they grew. They bought the laboratory from the city of Mainz. So this is this is happening. They are thinking, okay, where can I expand my capabilities and use the money I raised to invest? And they will do this in the places they have been to. And likely this startup that we just followed, that imaginary startup, will also look in Valencia. We'll say, okay, so you helped me. I mean, you introduced me to the first lawyer. Maybe I will hire that lawyer. Maybe I will hire salespeople in Valencia from other startups that were part of this accelerator and have a similar mindset, a similar understanding, and we can hit the ground running. If I hire them from maybe they're failing startups or from the network there. So definitely it is worth for a city. Economically, it is worth to be part of the journey in some way or the other. And since it's a very competitive space, founders moving away quickly and easily, you need to, as a city, strategically, you need to always think about, how can I be part? How can I be a constructive part in the journey? Worst idea that you can have is to say, I don't allow you to move. I only work with startups that will be from the date they are born till the date they die in one location. If you only want to work with those and you're not in the top hub, most likely you will not work with very successful founders.
And if you only want to work with the startups that are born, live and die in one place, you likely have a lot of startups that are dying. What I found interesting is the universities as a breeding ground. You have made up 4 quadrants here that I can see. First, global cities, where entrepreneurs identify as alumni of local universities. Not surprisingly, London is on top there. In the global cities, Paris, Barcelona, Madrid, and Munich. But the larger cities already hold some surprises, like Stockholm, Edinburgh, Dublin, Manchester, and Copenhagen. I also found the mid-sized cities pretty interesting. Vilnius, Bratislava, Nicosia and Cyprus, Trento and Varna, and the small cities Nottingham, St. Gallen in Switzerland, Lund, Delft, and Sheffield. Many interesting places you haven't heard from in international press as a startup hub, right?
Yes, and that's simply because the startups at this stage are not that prominent, right? So if you have like a founder starting out in Sheffield, the international press wouldn't care, right? That's why you need a support system, and this founder probably at the university in Sheffield has like a support system that helps them with the first steps. But then they likely move on, and once they are big enough so that they are in the press, no, they are not in Sheffield anymore, and that's why you wouldn't connect Sheffield with this success. You will find this only if you read their CV.
That's what I've also seen here. You found 56% of accelerator startups relocate within Europe. Less than half find an accelerator in the hometown, and the relocation is an accelerating trend, no pun intended, going from 49% to 62% of your respondents. I found this really interesting, and most of this acceleration is actually done by moving across borders within Europe.
Moving to other cities is the main the highest number, of course. So it can be also the same country. Now, if you move from any other smaller city in Germany to Munich or Berlin, you're still moving. So this is definitely a very strong trend. We see that more than half are doing this. So the participants in the accelerators are not from the same town, which also makes sense. Accelerators are competing if they need to also show their sponsors and investors something. If they would only source startups in their own hub, it wouldn't be that interesting, right? So they're an attraction point, and they and the startups also take these opportunities. And they source from the universities that you just mentioned. It's not. It's a clever idea for an accelerator to connect to universities, especially if they are not in the top hubs where they are basically abundant accelerator programs. But for example, as you mentioned, Lund or Sheffield, maybe there is not a top accelerator or an accelerator program that fits specifically with the need of the spin-off that we just saw. So they move to another place.
I found here it very interesting. You found out that accelerators, especially in small cities, have relatively more international guests. And that kind of struck me when you are now a mayor, a senator in charge of a certain area, in search of a certain city. Does it mean that smaller cities, who are even too small for a university, can greatly profit from a good accelerator program?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that there is a unique positioning to create acceleration, doing it really by the book, doing it on a very successful method. I think that you have a chance. Because many of the accelerators that we see are not very good in Europe. So we have a very low quality of accelerators. Many of them are sponsored, government run, with no business model, with no skin in the game. So performance of these accelerators has been notoriously low. Investments given by accelerators is very low compared to international standards. Basically, in Europe, mostly you get like an investment of 20,000 for participating in an accelerator, and you have to give away 10%. That's kind of like the general deal that you have. That's terrible. It's a terrible deal in international standards, but most accelerators operate on this. Even though there's many, there's a fantastic opportunity to position in this and to create better conditions, to create better programs. And where this happens is not so important as we see, because these accelerators are often working on product market fit. You basically you need like the right coaches, you need to have the right network, yes, but it doesn't have to be in the top hub. Now it can be also in Valencia. So there you can very, very nicely work on your product market fit. That's not a restriction. So in the end, positioning in this is a clever strategy.
And I found also another analysis from you guys, the international participation by accelerators in absolute numbers. Not surprisingly, number one is London, Paris, Berlin, Munich. But then I found interesting Lausanne as 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth. Number 6 is Amsterdam, Oslo, Barcelona, Copenhagen, Zurich. We haven't had on the list. Stockholm, Riga, again Valencia, Vienna and Lisbon. So they're drawing in a lot of international entrepreneurs, a lot of international talent just by providing good acceleration ecosystems, you have to call it, right?
Yes, and I think smaller places, of course, need to attract more internationally because their homegrown entrepreneurs are just not enough, right? So to run the accelerator, you need a certain volume of deal flow. And so you need to actively go out and run campaigns and look for participants outside. So that definitely is a challenge. I mean, another example is Berlin. In Berlin, you have a Gründerstipendium, which is a stipend plus accelerator program that's sponsored by the city government. And funny enough is they have created like, I think 10, 15 smaller programs that accelerate the startups that get that stipend. And these 10, 15 programs, they all start on the same day. So to run this program in Berlin, you need for each program at least 5 to 10 participants, right? And then you have 10, 15 programs starting on the same day. That means Berlin needs to find 50, 80 participants on the same day. And so you see like what kind of requirement in deal flow you have to run an accelerator program on a certain level. So yeah, it's a challenge, and in Berlin maybe you can generate enough homegrown entrepreneurs, but for sure as a small city you need to source internationally.
And talking about internationally, I also found a very interesting graphic here about the key markets of the respondents of your survey. Far ahead by more than 40% are the US, but interestingly, almost 15% said their most important target market is Germany, followed by Southern Europe, UK, Central and Eastern Europe, Nordics, Asia. There we are already below 5%. France, the Middle East, South America, also known as LATAM, and Africa, which I found pretty interesting that you can all reach by going there in a local acceleration program. I think there's a big opportunity there. And talking about the last step, because we are already recording for almost 35 minutes, the fundraising hub or international hub that are 12 ones that make headlines where in the last time I forgot Helsinki. I'm so sorry, guys. And there I found something interesting as well, because it's not that there are restrained to this hub, but you have a very nice graphic of the unicorns where they're headquartered and where they're actually expanding on a map. So that means there are like a handful of places where the unicorns are headquartered, but there are many, many more dots spread all across Europe where they have branches, where they have local places where they, for example, have a sales team in Germany, where they have a development team in Bucharest, where they have something else. It's very interesting. Can you talk a little bit more about this? Because I do believe the final destinations, the hubs, the 12 in Europe are already pretty well known. Unless you think it is not the case, then we can make the next episode about the 12 hubs here.
Now, for sure, we have like a concentration of unicorns in a few places. Now, that's where they moved to. That's where they have become successful, and their headquarters are there. But they are headquarters. They're there for a legal reason. They're there for steering functions that can only be based there because of the networks of the capital networks mainly. But then the functions of creating the products, of organizing the sales, etc. They are spread out in across different countries. And if you look at Europe, you see very interesting places that have accumulated a high number of unicorn offices. For example, Milan is one of the places that pops up, which is like an entry point to the Italian and Southern European markets. So definitely that's a place where you see a lot of unicorns move to. You see the same in the Iberian Peninsula, in Madrid mainly, but also in Porto, which I find very interesting. Porto has a strong IT and IT knowledge base in the universities around there. So you see quite a few offices in that area. So you see accumulations, also Dublin, Ireland, accumulations of unicorn offices rather than unicorn headquarters. And that means you're not lost if you don't have your own unicorn. Now you can have also a slice of the pie by hosting expanding unicorns. And that, by the way, can also create spillover effects for your startup ecosystem. Then, of course, if you have a unicorn opening a branch in Porto, these people that work there and the entrepreneurs that come to expand there, they will leave a mark. They will leave like some new ideas. They will connect to local people and help them on their entrepreneurial journey at best. So you will have benefits from the expansion of unicorns. And yeah, basically looking at all of this, the geography of innovation is much more complex and detailed as let's say there's one hub that rules the rest. No, there's like really like an intricate network of relations and different functions that different places take. And yeah, finding your way as a founder to create your own network of capabilities is a big challenge. And then as a city that wants to attract these founders, that's also a tough task, but something you should embark on because it can be really worthwhile.
For everybody who'd like to learn more, we'll have down here in the show notes part of the research report that we just quoted. If you're a founder, if you're an investor, if you're thinking about setting up an accelerator, that would be very interesting data. As we said, with Startuprad.io, this is all free of charge and exclusively only available from us by Deep Ecosystem. Thomas, we will be leaving now. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure talking to you because the aim was to keep this recording under 40 minutes and we'll barely make this. The next episode will be actually next year in 2023. So Thomas, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Yes, even though it's just November, Merry Christmas already and a Happy New Year. I'm looking forward to next year.
Sounds a little bit strange saying this when we're recording this end of October, but nonetheless, we will be back. Thanks, guys. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's all, folks. Find more news, streams, events, and interviews at www.startuprad.io. Remember, sharing is caring.